sticking here my vape. Yeah, I don't want to leave this YouTube window open because it'll mess up the I'll open it up on my phone while you're talking. Okay, here I'm gonna hit
Yeah. Uh-huh.
record. I think we're live on YouTube now. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Typical Skeptic podcast. I have another fascinating guest with me today. This is really going to blow a lot of people's minds, and it's going to open up a lot of evidence for what we call targeting. But I was just talking to Jesse, who I have on today. He doesn't like to use that word targeting because there's like a connotation to it. But that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about Havana Syndrome and targeted individuals, basically. And who I have with me, I have Jesse Beltran. He's a certified master hypnotist and transformative leader in the field of hypnotherapy. He holds a diploma from the nationally accredited Hypnosis Motivational Institute of Tarzana, California. Blending advanced training with extensive real world experience before embarking on his hypnotherapy journey, Jesse was a dedicated firefighter paramedic. His pioneering efforts led to the creation of the paramedic emergency transportation system for the Sacramento Fire Department. As president of the International Center Against Abuse of Covert Technologies, he has advocated tirelessly for the community's welfare and safety. Jesse's academic and professional background is equally impressive. He was a member of the Mathematics, Engineering, and Science Association at UC Davis and is certified in blood and airborne pathogens by Sacramento State University. Additionally, he has co-founded California's third largest internet service provider, focusing on proprietary programming and pioneering high-speed data transmission via microwave technology. Currently, Jesse serves as a visionary president of the Cosmic Clarity Connections, LLC. This innovative organization bridges the gap between science, space, and spirituality through accessible seminars. With over a decade of experience, Jesse is acclaimed for his unique approach to hypnosis, specializing in stress reduction, phobia management, PTSD treatment, and performance enhancement. Jesse Beltran's career exemplifies dedication, innovation, and an unwavering commitment to enhancing lives through public service and the power of the mind. And with all that said, I'd like to give a big warm welcome to the show for the first time. Jesse, thank you so much for coming on. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Yeah. So, but how did this all start? So you were interested in hypnotherapy, but like, when did you first start getting interested in like what the government or some maybe black ops agency might be doing as far as like covertly and targeting individuals and Havana Syndrome and all this? Because that's a deep rabbit hole, and that's a lot of people don't want to talk about it, honestly.
Well, right now, timing is actually ripe. There was a hearing in the Department of Homeland Security and congressional members about 2 months ago, March 8th. And they had three witnesses. And one of the witnesses was a retired Lieutenant Colonel Greg Egrin. And he was an advocator to help federal employees who were experiencing some odd symptoms. It started, according to them, around 2014 in Havana. And what was happening is the diplomats were complaining about hearing acute onset of strange noises and other ailments like severe head pain, dizziness, nausea, uh, brain fog, and electrical shocks to the extremities. And he was giving testimony on how this not only affected diplomats, but was affecting their families, not only in Havana, but here in the homeland. Now, how I got involved is back in early 2009, 2010, I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Hall in Texas, and he is the author of two books. The first book was called A New Breed: Satellite Terrorism in America. And the second is Guinea Pigs: Technologies of Control. And him and I got on this topic about individuals here in the United States that were complaining about the exact same symptoms. And he was doing what is called an RF scan, and he would do it occasionally on individuals who were having these complaints. And I asked him, and I said, so why aren't we doing anything about it? And he says, the reason is, and you got to think about the times, back in 2009, 2010, this phenomenon wasn't at the forefront. And what he said is what happened is most of the individuals who would go to their physicians, because that's what we're conditioned to do, would talk about these complaints. And it's the moment you start saying that you're hearing weird sounds, you automatically get diagnosed with some type of mental disorder or psychosis disorder. And so I said, well, why aren't we doing this on a mass scale? And so I myself and two other individuals, we started an organization called the International Center of the Abuse of Covert Technologies. And I'm going to call it ISA Act for short. And so I started publicizing that if you are experiencing this phenomena, please come to our meetings. And I held the first meeting in Sacramento, California, and 100 people showed up. And so I was really surprised. And what was interesting about it is that every single person in that room complained about the exact same thing. There was very, very little deviation from it. So we held a second meeting in Davis, California, near the campus of UC Davis there, and 300 people showed up at that event. And so I knew I was on to something. And what we were doing is we were doing RF scans, preliminary RF scans on a mass scale. So what is an RF scan? We used a device called a JM20 Pro, and it's a general frequency detector. And what we would do is we would scan around an individual's body. And the nice thing about this equipment is you can calibrate it so where you only need to be within 2 inches of the emission, because we live in a wireless society. So it's very important that you have some type of technology that can really eliminate any of those outside frequencies setting off the detector. So you calibrate it, so you have to be really, really close. And so I started doing that in California, and we started getting some interesting data. Initially, the majority of the victims were Caucasian females in their 40s or greater, highly educated. And then it dropped down to Caucasian males, and then African American females, African American males, then Asians, and then it dwindled down from there in ethnicity. Went to the Midwest, and the statistics were exactly the same. It started to change slightly when we started getting into the Chicago area and moving over to the East Coast. What flipped was the majority were then African American females, then African American males, then Caucasians, then Asians, and then it dwindled down from there. Now, the only deviation in the United States that we had is I was invited by a group of folks to come up to Virginia and speak to them and do the RF scanning up that way. And what was interesting, we had about 100 people or so. They were all military subcontractors. Now, I had been doing this for some time now, and I started to notice a particular pattern, particularly with those who were severely affected by this phenomenon. Now, what I found out and was observing is that those who were highly suggestible were the most affected. And when I say most affected, it was just debilitating. We're talking about doctors, attorneys. I've had politicians come to me, white collar workers, blue collar workers. It runs the gamut. Okay, so in noticing this, what I did up in Virginia is I started out that meeting with the military subcontractors, and I asked them to raise their hands if they thought they were highly suggestible, and no one raised their hand. And I wasn't surprised about that. Then I asked, well, if you don't think you're highly suggestible, raise your hand. And almost everyone did, with the exception of a few people. And I always felt they were probably a little bit shy or timid to come forth. So anyways, what I did is I picked the most intimidating person in the room to come to the middle of the room and speak to me. And he, good looking gentleman, real fit, African American, and he was about 6'6". And what's interesting is he was working on the AIDS virus. And I always thought that was interesting. I go, why is the military working on the AIDS virus in 2010? I would have expected it to be the medical facilities and laboratories like that. But anyway, so we started to speak a little bit in the middle of the room. And as we're talking, his hands were closed. And I said, hey, do me a favor, try pulling your hands apart. And did this. And the more he tried, he couldn't. And he tried as hard as he could. And everyone in the room was just aghast. And I, I started to see him get anxiety. And so what I did is I went up to him and I just said, sleep. And the reason I did this demonstration is because I wanted to show everyone that you can do this just having a normal conversation to someone who's highly suggestible.
What do you mean by
And
highly suggestible? Can you explain that? Like, what do you mean by highly suggestible? I think that's probably something we have to establish before we go, you know?
yeah, so there is a degree of suggestibility, and basically what it means is basically your the ability for your subconscious mind to bypass your critical factor and go into the subconscious. And uh, we develop this depending on how we're brought up, and depending on the dominance of the mother versus the father, uh, if they were overly strict versus very passive. There's a lot of uh, things that come into play there. Okay. Um, it primarily,
Wait, someone who was like abused, like in their childhood, like say they like their parents abused them, like mentally, like like always call them names or not call them names, but like maybe put them down or something like that, like anything like that, like verbal abuse, would that tend to make someone highly suggestible?
that could that is one of the factors that could make them highly suggestible. Um, and determining on did you have a loving mother versus a very unaffectionate mother, or did you have a very affectionate father versus unaffectionate father? There's all types of things that come into play, and there's a way to test for that too. We can give a test on the suggestibility, and if any of your listeners are curious, we have a website um, for an event that we're putting on, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
It's
so
called
that
my
got a
and
lot of good speakers, you know.
yes. It's called mindnexuslive.com, and you can click on the header. There's a place that says suggestibility test, and you can go through that. And if you fall in the high suggestibility category, it'll flag us, and then we'll reach out to you, and then we'll delve into that a little bit deeper if need be. But to get back to the military subcontractors, um, once I put him to sleep, then I started to use positive affirmations, saying, now that you realize that you're highly suggestible, um, it's the beginning and the first step of learning how to defend yourself and to become not as suggestible and so forth. But this is just layman terms, real simple. It's much more invasive than this. When we work with someone to try to, if they are highly suggestible, or the word somnambulism is what it medically called, and basically means you're 100% suggestible. And the reason I bring this up is because we
Does
got a
that
lot.
basically mean, I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand, does that basically mean easily influenced?
That would be a way to say it. It is a degree of influence, yeah,
Yeah.
but it goes a
Okay.
little bit deeper than that. Okay, and
Okay.
as I begin to explain to your listeners why this is important to know, and this is just a small subset about the domestic Havana syndrome um, issue that we're attacking here in the United States. In Congress, they admitted that Havana syndrome is here. Colonel Leggerin said, yes, it's here. And what's interesting, he said that a lot of the information when he was testifying, he couldn't say out publicly because it's classified. But he did say to the congression that if you put him in a skiff, he can tell you who to subpoena, what doors to knock down, and who to go after, which
So
I
he
found
knows
that
who's
to be
doing the targeting.
fascinating.
He knows who's
Yes.
messing with people.
Yeah,
A
he
lot
knows
of people would
exactly
love
who's
to know
doing this.
that, because a lot of people are probably like really like, I mean, a lot of people are, this has ruined their lives. You know what I mean? Like, I know people who they want to come on my show. They can't even come on my show because, the targeting messes with their everyday lives. And if they hear me say this, I'm not, like being mean it's not, they know that because I care about anybody who's targeted that comes on my show. I really do. I value them all because it's all a piece to the puzzle. But I mean, like people are experiencing targeting, like to a high level. I have people that also, I wanted to go over this with you too, and I don't want to get you off track, but I have people who come on my show that talk about V2K, which is supposedly the voice of God technology. I don't know if this
Mhm.
ties in at all, but I'd love to, talk about that as well. But sorry, I didn't mean to go off track.
Oh, no, no, no. Colonel Egren just blatantly says that on Congress that the issue is the biggest complaint among the diplomats, the FBI agents, and the CIA agents, and their family members who experience this. Their biggest complaint is the acute onset of hearing bizarre sounds. Okay, so there's a sound being transmitted to them, and what I found ironic is all those symptoms that they talk about, and they say it started in 2014, and they only acknowledge that it's affecting federal employees. They sidestep the question when the politicians and the congressmen ask them if this is happening to civilians. They said, you know what, we only work with federal employees, so they couldn't speak to that. There was one attorney there that was testifying. It did say that if you look at his Twitter feed, that it appears that there is civilian incidences, but because he only represents federal employees, he can't attest to that. But I can attest that there are literally thousands of people here in the United States that are afflicted by this. And then not only here in the United States, because of what I was doing, brought me to Europe. I had government agencies ask me to come visit them to test their diplomats, and to bring um, people who I felt that for sure were victimized by this technology. And they allowed me to take them into what is called an anechoic chamber. It's a very high end Faraday cage. If you know what a Faraday cage,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
your
especially
listeners
from
that don't,
EMF, right?
yes, it blocks out frequency spectrums. Now, an anechoic chamber blocks out huge frequency spectrums. So when we took the individuals in, and we did controls, we took people who weren't victims and we would test them in the chamber, and they would come up with nothing. But the ones that we did test did have frequency readings within the anechoic chamber. And what was interesting, those from the United States all had similar frequencies. Those within Europe had a different but similar frequencies. And depending on where they were from the planet, it seemed to follow a similar pattern. So you're asking about this V2K phenomenon. Um, so we already know that at least the Havana Syndrome victims that are federal employees and agents and FBI agents and diplomats, the whole gamut, they are hearing a sound. Okay. That is V2K. I don't care how they want to spin it's V2K. Now, if you look back in history, but it's V2K on steroids. It's psychic driving is the appropriate terminology.
Okay, now talk
Ewan
about what
Camp,
that is. What is psychic
okay,
driving?
yeah. So Ewan Cameron was a Canadian psychiatrist who was hired by the United States government to test on whether or not you can erase memories from the human brain. And so he would take patients and he would use a plethora of modalities. One of them was long-term sleeping. We're talking months under drug therapy. And then he would put a helmet over their head with a tape recorder, and they would repeat themes over and over and over again into their mind. So they would hear it while they're in these long-term sleeps. He would use shock therapy. He would use it was horrible what he was doing. But he really messed people up. And that is really the infancy of psychic driving. But now, if we look at what the Havana Syndrome is, there are individuals who are hearing these sounds 24/7, 365 days a year. So now it's psychic driving on steroids. And we've taken individuals 2 miles down in the earth, and still the signals are still penetrating the earth. So
You're
that's,
putting people 2 miles down in the earth. You got to talk about that.
yeah,
That's interesting. How'd you do that?
yeah. We would take them down into these deep caverns that are all granite. And then we would take the equipment down there and then we would test to see if we get the same results. And the results were the same.
Wow. So these are some really high powered frequencies. I mean, these are like, I mean, wow, that's insane. That's like, that's actually scary, you know?
Yeah, it is. We're now I sent you an email. There's a report. It's called New World Vistas. And it was a report that was released in 1994 by the United States Air Force. And it talked about 50 years into the future for the Air Force. And if you look on page 89, and it talks about bio metric weapons. And when you read it, they have, and they talk about here in 2020 about what they would be using this for. And I'll read the paragraph to your listeners because it's important that they hear this. Now, this was in 1994, November 8th of 1994. And this is all the big think tanks in our military that submitted this report. And I'm going to read the paragraph, and it says, it would also appear possible to create high fidelity speech in the human body, raising the possibility of covert suggestion and psychological direction. When a high powered microwave pulse in gigahertz range strikes the human body, a very small temperature perturbation occurs. This is associated with a sudden expansion of the slightly heated tissue. This expansion is fast enough to produce an acoustic wave. If a pulse stream is used, it should be possible to create an internal acoustic field between 5 and 15 kilohertz range, which is audible. Thus, it may be possible to talk to selected adversaries in a fashion that would be most disturbing to them. It talks about how they can be affected in a negative way, in a positive way. They can cause thought issues. They can get people to behave in ways they would not normally do. It talks about how it will affect the human nervous system. So this was all pre-planned. And people have to understand now, this is not only happening here in America, it's not happening just in Havana. It's happening everywhere, but one place, according to Colonel Egren in his testimony. He says the only place that this is not happening is Antarctica. So we have a global campaign right
Oh
now.
my God, that makes me think that the Nazis are behind this because remember they said the Nazis went to bed. I don't know if you get into like conspiracy, but they say the Nazis, the Fourth Reich, went to Antarctica and set up Base 211, which was like New Schwabenland, and they wanted to take over America. And then there's like the whole story of Admiral Byrd went down there and he got defeated. And then supposedly the Nazis sent a truce to America and they invaded our mainstream media, which could make me think that they could be somewhere behind this. But I mean, that's just a conspiracy theory, you know. But I mean, you got to start to think who would be behind this, or you would have to think maybe it's maybe non-human, like it's ET technology, you know. Like how do we have this all of a sudden, you know? And like why are we using it on our own people? It doesn't make it's all of it sounds crazy, but it's all true because what I was going to say to follow that up is like people have this going off in their heads 24/7. It's people feel like they have a voice talking to them all day long, like it's an AI program or something. So sorry, I know I said a lot there. You know, some of it was really conspiracy based, but wherever you want to go with that.
Well, I've heard tidbits of what you're saying. Um, we know that this is coming from satellite transmissions. Um, we know that this is going everywhere, and the only reason I can think of is someone in a position of power is pretty confident and pretty bold enough to think that now is the time. Now, that New World Vista report, I just read one paragraph of it. When you read the whole report, it's pretty scary, and it looks like we're in the midst of it, and there's no going backwards. So the only way to protect oneself about this is to become educated, and this has been my fight, and this is the reason why we put this conglomerate of top people together. so that we can begin to educate the general population. Because I know that the individuals who have been suffering from this, typically they get labeled as a tinfoil hat type individual. Up until recently, up until that testimony in the hearing in Congress at the Department of Homeland Security, because now they're saying at least these symptoms happen to federal employees. So the next step that needs to happen is that we need to educate the general population so that we can say, well, hey, look, if Homeland Security is saying this is happening to their federal employees, but we need to pay attention. They did say it was happening to family members. So those family members are not federal employees. So by admitting that you are now admitting that is happening in the general population. And this is the important thing that we need to recognize here. And so this is why we put this Mind Nexus live event together. And we have psychologists that will be speaking who are awoke that this is happening. We have Dr. John Hall will be there, Dr. Rima Lebo, who was married to Stubblebine, if people aren't aware, General Stubblebine. Ben Chastain is there. We have Tyler Koala, Aaron Kuhn.
Yeah, I know Tyler
Um,
said he's been on my show. He's had targeting issues. Like, he talks openly about it. So it's not anything that like, he's told me about it on my show. I like Tyler a lot. He's a really good guy. And
well,
Aaron's
he's a
cool too. They're
Yeah,
really
Aaron and Tyler, they're both amazing. And I was not aware until recently. I was on his show recently, and I wasn't aware until till then that he was going through it. But
one thing I want to ask you is like, like I've had like mental health issues and I know other people have too. Like, where is the line between mental health and targeting? Like, how do we know what's what? Like,
well,
and do you think that the increase over the years in mental health as due to the targeting?
I can tell you this: our mental health industry, um, although they may mean well, but what the symptoms that are associated with the Havana syndrome and domestic Havana syndrome are textbook of what the doctors in the medical community are taught to diagnose as schizophrenia. Okay. I took, so let's delve into this deeper. So this signal is being sent out worldwide. We know this. Okay. So those who are suffering when they're in large crowds, I always asked, I said, well, if that signal is targeting out an individual, why isn't everyone else around them being affected in that same way? So we have cases right now where implants are being removed from them. And this is the mechanism we strongly believe as how they're receiving the signal.
Wow. Yeah, I know. I saw in the notes here that you worked with the late Dr. Lear for a little bit. I was a big fan of his because he was researching a lot of alien abduction cases where he thought that a lot of the implants were coming from alien abductions. I know you don't probably get into alien abductions, but like, what was your connection to the late Dr. Lear?
Well, I was on the Coast to Coast program, and they wanted to mention Dr. Lear and as being basically the pioneer in the implant phenomena. Um, and they wanted me to touch on that and transition into what we've discovered and what we're doing currently in the last 2 decades. And it is my feeling that this is all man-made. I am a skeptic about the alien phenomena because I think more and more as we delve into this, we're finding that this is all man-made technology. And if you look at that World Vistas report, it's important that we disseminate that because it was classified, but I obtained it by someone who put in a FOIA request.
Yeah.
And it says it's cookie cutter. The recipe is there, the agenda is there, the protocols are all there, and we're in the midst of it. And we need to enlighten everyone. We need to educate everyone, including our medical community, so that when they have someone that comes to them with these symptoms, that they don't automatically brush them off as a mental health issue. Because this is not a disease process. If you have foreign bodies in you that are allowing a specific signal to go to you and
What do
then
these,
cause this phenomenon.
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you. I was gonna say, what do these implants look like? Are they biological, or are they have like a biological casing, or do they, well, are they electronic or bioelectric, or how does this work? This sounds so fascinating. It's
Yeah.
very sinister, but it's also fascinating, you know?
Yeah. So it's a good question. So it depends on what year we're talking about. I also know through another FOIA release that the military had been working on these implants in the 40s, the 1940s and 50s. They were the size of a large grain of rice. Then when you start getting towards the 90s and the 2000s, they were a small grain of rice. Now, when I was there with the military subcontractors, we visited a colleague of my wife's who she went to college with, who worked for the Pentagon, and he asked why I was there, and I didn't want to tell him everything, but I did talk about this implant phenomenon, and he goes, "Oh, we can tell you exactly by the design of the implant what year they're being utilized," and he goes, "But if it happens today," and this was back in 2011, 2012. He says you're SOL. And the reason he says is because they're nano size. Now there's a case that you were asking about what these look like. There's a Dave Larson report. He was a politician out of Southern California. They remove over 10 implants out of his person, and he still has more in him to this day, my understanding. But he sued because he was having these exact same symptoms. And he lost in court. And the reason he lost in court is because the judge says that he signed up to participate in an experiment. Now,
Wow. Did he even
the
know he
issue,
did that?
they did not give him full disclosure, and this is part of our fight. Number one, if someone's going to put something in your body, you better damn well be have full disclosure about what you're getting into. Because I know if he would have known, there's no way in hell that he would have agreed to have participated in any experiment like that.
Yeah.
Now there's a Dave Walbert case. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about Walbert,
And we don't,
who
I don't think, I mean, it'd be good to tell us because I don't know, and I don't think the audience knows.
okay, he had a microchip implanted in his torso on his back. And he was successful in obtaining a restraining order through the court system against the perpetrators who he believed did this to him. He not only did he have medical imagery, he had a positive RF scan, he had toxicology reports, and we'll talk about why that's important. He had all the documentation, so the judge issued the order.
Who did
That's
the
another
restraining
case.
order against, though? The government or what?
No, it was against the perpetrator who he had an invention and he believes that that's why they did this to him. They were trying to steal his invention. Um,
Who's they? Is that
in that case, well, you'd have to look up the court case because right
okay?
off the top, yeah.
That's what
But
I'm
the
trying to figure out.
restraining
Who's
order.
doing this? Like, I mean, who's behind all this sinister? It's insane. Trust me, I'm like a 110% believer that this is all happening, and like, this is like really insane. It's mind
Yeah,
blowing.
well, in those two cases, they know exactly who did it. And there's another case, a Bob Boyce case. He was an inventor of a high efficiency engine, and when I spoke to him, he had cancer, and how he found, and he also had a microchip in him. Now, his story goes that he was at work at his office, and he loved Mountain Dew, and his business partner gave him Mountain Dew, and he woke up 3 days later, not knowing what the heck happened. He was just knocked out, and then he developed his cancer. And while he was at work in a Faraday cage, he had a frequency detector, like what I was describing earlier, and the wand accidentally went by his shoulder. And so he thought that was odd that it pinged. So he got an x-ray, and what they found in an x-ray was a microchip surrounded by a tumor, a cancerous tumor. So he had it removed, and pathology had taken the tumor, and the microchip disappeared. So he says, well, his cancer went into remission, but then came back aggressively. So he decided to go back in the Faraday cage and scan himself again, and he found another microchip in him. This time they kept a chain of custody. So when they followed the serial number, it went to an NSA database.
Oh my God. That's insane.
Yes.
That's in,
And yeah. And guess who his partner used to work for? The
who?
NSA. The NSA.
Wow.
That was his business partner. His partner was concerned about, he thought that he was going to sell this invention to, I believe it was the Japanese, or maybe, yeah, I
This
think
is
it was
what
the
I'm saying. Like,
Japanese.
this has to be like this. I know you don't really believe in the extraterrestrials, but it makes me think that, like, behind this, like at the highest levels, that this is ETs or entities, or maybe someone foreign. Because who would want to destroy America from the inside out? And like you said, this is happening in other countries too. Who would want to destroy the world from the inside out? I mean, is it like people like the Rothschilds and stuff like that? We hear about like Illuminati and stuff like that. But I mean, I know that's conspiracy, but you have to start thinking out like, because I mean, why would the NSA want to destroy the United States from the inside out? It doesn't make sense. Like,
Mhm.
you would think they would want their citizens healthy. I mean, they never want us healthy, but I'm just thinking hypothetically. You would think that they would want us functioning to make them money because we're their workhorses, right? But it's not that way. They want to, I guess, experiment on us and like do all this weird shit and targeting and and yeah, I don't know if you saw this too. There's a website called targetedjustice.com. Like, it's all for targeted individuals. It's really interesting. It's yeah, so this is a huge thing. It's a huge
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm very familiar with all these organizations, but I will tell you this, you look at that New World Vistas report, it talks about a dilemma that we're facing. And that dilemma is by 2030, they believe the world population in that report was going to be around 15.2 billion people. And they say it would be unsustainable unless we come up with technology that would help us. So, um, right now we've got divide and conquer type mentalities. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I want to see the data. I want to see where everything leads. Okay. But could this be a depopulation agenda? Could this be an agenda to get everyone to have one thought process or get rid of the people who aren't controllable? I don't know. But here's what can happen with this technology. Remember, if I can talk to a military subcontractor and just have a normal conversation with him and get him to a point where he can't take his hands apart and then put him to sleep, just like you and I are having a conversation now. What do you think this technology that's transmitting sound to someone who is on the high suggestibility side, what can they do? Now, the names Aaron Alexis and Myron may ring a bell to some of your listeners, may not. But Aaron Alexis was the one who went and shot, I believe, killed 16 people at the Navy Yard in on the East
I was just gonna
Coast.
bring that up. The shooters, the shooters.
Yeah,
It's like, even like the Trump shooting the other day. Like, what possessed that guy to do that? It makes no sense. You know what I mean?
uh, yeah, that was a little odd, but we'll just see as the data comes out, and then everyone will make their judgment. But Myron May was an attorney, and he did the same thing. But they both called me asking for help, and I they were very impatient because when this initial onset starts, you're in fight or flight mode, and their mentality and physiology was is that they were gonna fight. I had no idea. I keep thinking over and over again, was there something different that I could have done? And there wasn't. But remember, Aaron Alexis inscribed, "This is my EMP weapon" on the butt of the rifle. Um, we're in for some interesting times, but again, it's important that we educate everyone so that we start rethinking how our mental health systems are diagnosing these individual cases, because all the mental health system does to these individuals. Remember, we're having cases where implants are being removed. All it does is re-victimize them again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. So, but I mean, are they feeling better after the implants are removed, or like how are they able to live a normal life?
Um, in most cases, yes, but remember, the Dave Larson, he still has implants in him to this day. No,
He wants them, or what?
no, it's very expensive to get these out. I don't know. I don't know why they didn't remove all of them. All I know is that when you look at the Dave Larson report, it's an extraordinary amount of implants that he has, and these things are very, very tiny. They almost look biological, but they're not. So that takes me to another point. We do a preliminary RF scan out in the field because it allows us to do a lot at once. But if you come up positive, we say if you think this is the phenomenon that's happening to you and it's not a disease process, although this can cause problems, like in Bob Boyce's case, we highly suspect that the implant is what caused him to get cancer because the cancer would subside when they remove the implants. Where was I going with this? Oh, the what has to happen is after you get a preliminary RF scan is you either get radiographic imagery that could substantiate it or not, toxicology reports that can measure the amount of metals in your system, and then you would need what's called a nonlinear junction scan. And a nonlinear junction scan is a very high-end scanner. What it does, because there's two type of implants. There's active, those that are on 365 days a year, and then those are passive. Those are not on. You have to have a signal sent to them to activate them, and then they start working. So what a nonlinear junction scan will do, it'll throw out a signal to the passive implants. If there's ferrous material in there, it'll send an echo back to the scanner, and then it'll say, okay, I got an echo back. It'll send it back. It activates the implant, and then the third echo will read the frequency. So they'll actually find the location where they're at. Now, here's what's interesting. Without disclosing or who the person is, we have an individual right now who used to work for our military, who came up with a frequency that we've never seen before. And we have a high suspicion that everyone who did what he did when he was in the military probably has the same type of implants in them. So it'll be interesting to see where this journey goes with this particular topic. But nonetheless, the bottom line is, I know I would never want this in me. I know you would never want to put it in you. But look at our media. Our media now, our media used to be our checks and balances to corruption. And I'm not saying I don't believe in our government. I believe in our government. I just don't believe in corruption in our government. Okay. We live in the greatest country on the planet. I really do feel that way.
I do too. I'm a
But
patriot, but I'm not political, if that makes any sense. Because I can't
correct.
agree
Yeah.
that any of these politicians are out to help us, you know? But
Yeah.
I do believe in patriotism. My family were in all the wars and stuff. My dad was in Vietnam and my grandfather was in World War II. So I love like the military and I not well, obviously not the deep dark military that's doing this to people, but I mean, like our regular military, like the men and women that are out there fighting for our country. I have like a high respect for them, but like I just can't get into politics. I really can't because I haven't seen anybody that wants to really, for us, I feel like we would need a whole reformation of the, and I don't mean to get into politics, but I just feel like we would need a whole reformation of the whole system. Just throw out
Yeah.
everything and put something new in, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
No, it is. We do need a reset of some kind. In order to get back to, we have been so far from the truth for so many decades that to get back to the truth is going to be very, very difficult. So the truth being where we started, you know, in a wholesome way. So we're going to need a massive reset of some sort. And I'm hoping that that's close around the corner,
You
but
know
it's
what
not going to
else
happen until everyone wakes up.
Yeah, I agree. It's people have to wake up. But you know what I was just thinking about? If you go back to like the times of like the 50s, like like I know Happy Days was like an 80s show, but it was based on the 50s. The 50s in America were like real wholesome and like it was right after the war and everybody was like feeling patriotic and good about the country, but it was like a real wholesome feeling. Then it's like Vietnam came and like then cocaine came into the country and like heroin and like all there was a lot of different factors. Then like the mind control experiments started. Like you would hear about MK Ultra and stuff like that, and then now we're hearing about all this other stuff that's happening. I know you're not a conspiracy theorist, but I get into all the other stuff, and it makes me think that like the country took a real dark turn around maybe the 60s, 70s, and some people say it was really dark before that. But somewhere we got lost as a country, it seems like. And it seems like it's getting
Well,
darker and darker and darker and more corrupt and more perverted, and if that makes any sense.
no, you're absolutely right. But the MK Ultra experiments that happen. Has the United States had a history of experimenting on our own people? Absolutely. You can mention the Tuskegee experiments, where they let African American men get infected with syphilis and let it run rampant just to see what it would do. The LSD experiments in San Francisco, where they were taking Johns who would take prostitutes out and they were experimenting on them. We have a history of doing this. You had President Clinton apologize for us for doing this. But the crazy thing is, they never gave compensation or made it right for all these people that they ruined, let alone killed. And so think about this Havana Syndrome phenomenon. Colonel Egren said the whole agenda is to make someone look like they're crazy. I sent you a link to a video we produced that had the testimony in Congress in there. And he specifically talks about these things. And it was important that we disseminate that. So if your listeners and somehow you can put a link in your podcast to
Yeah,
look at that, it's going to be very, very important that they see that, because we're in interesting times. Right now is the right time for everyone to stand up and wake up and say, look, this is happening to us and this is happening to us now. Um, Congress knows that the phenomenon is there. Homeland Security knows this phenomenon is there. I've talked to Secret Service individuals who say they now get briefed about the Havana Syndrome and get told what to look for when they're going overseas or going on an assignment. Same thing is happening to FBI agents. It's happening everywhere. And Colonel Egren says, at least for the federal side, that they're going after the best of the best. So they're top CIA agents, they're top diplomats, they're top brains. These are the types of individuals they're going at least on the federal level.
yeah, yeah. I think the government doesn't want to give any kind of they'll never admit that they did any of this stuff. Whoever's doing it.
Yeah.
I'd love to know like who's behind the doors of these like deep dark programs that are like, because I mean it doesn't stop with this. I mean, I know, but like when you go to this conference, you're probably going to hear from people. I know you're not a conspiracy theorist, but there's a large portion of the community that also feels like they're being abducted by aliens, and when they get abducted by aliens, they get abducted. They call it a MILAB, which is a military abduction, and be a lot of people think that it's the military abducting them, and it's weird, and they think that maybe the government at some point like simulating these aliens, like that they're that so the deep dark technology, there's no end to it. And then there's people that believe that they've been involved in secret space programs, the Montauk project, which was real. I mean, like it's this shit is like we're neck deep in it. I know you're not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just saying this stuff does exist. I mean, people believe in it. I do, because I talk to people all the time with this stuff. I
Yeah.
can't say
Well,
100% for sure. I can't give you proof on all of it, but it's like I
My
don't.
my feeling is, yeah, my feeling is it's probably humans that are doing this. Because you got to remember in that report, that New World Vistas report, um, it says it can get some manipulate their thought processes in their minds. You can get someone to hallucinate, see uh, see things that are not there if you know how to use language in a specific way to bypass the conscious mind and go into the subconscious.
That's fascinating.
So
But what I just thought about? What about I was thinking that entities can possess people, though, it seems like. And I'd love to hear what you think about that. Maybe that could be, because like, going back to for years now, there have been exorcisms where people have been like, how am I trying to explain this? Sorry, I'm getting tongue twisted, but they'll get possessed by what they think is a demon or an entity. Then all of a sudden they're speaking Aramaic. They're saying things that they would have never thought. They give psychic they give psychic like they'll know things. They'll know things about people like they're trying to exercise them. You know what I mean?
mhm.
It's really a phenomena. But it
so
makes me think, could this be humans too at some point, or do you think that there are entities in our world from other dimensions that might, you know,
mhm.
come into our consciousness? I do.
I,
I'd
I will
love.
say this as a hypnotist. Um, can you program that type of behavior in someone? If you have the right person, absolutely. Now, I have done regression uh, many times with people, and there are some things I can't explain, um, where people will start speaking another language that they've never known, um, know things that they shouldn't have, particularly children. Um, I'm not I'm not sure, what that's about, but all I can say is from my experience that it's not unheard of. So I guess what I'm saying is it's not 100%. Yes, you're on the you know on the spot, but what I'm saying is yes, it can be induced in someone if you have the right person. And there are cases that I know that have, these are individuals that have not been programmed or mind controlled in any way, um, that I can't explain when you do regressions, the type of phenomena that comes out of it.
That's interesting, but
Yeah,
again, this boils down to like suggestibility, like you said at the beginning. Like there are
correct,
some
correct,
people highly suggestible, and if they are, they can be influenced to a high degree, and that can produce a lot of effects, right?
correct. And the issue is, we're human beings. We're all humans. We are always in and out of altered states. But the thing is to teach people how to. You can use hypnosis to swing someone who's 100% suggestible or highly suggestible, and you can help them with hypnosis to become more towards normal suggestibility, to where they'll use critical thinking factors, where they'll use healthy thought processes whenever they're faced with making decisions. Now, if you're highly suggestible, you're probably having relationship issues. You're probably having issues at work. You're probably having societal issues. It's like a roller coaster, because you just never have consistency because you're always in different states. And this is also part of the construct.
That's sad too, because I know
Yeah,
someone who can't like live a normal life because of the way their mental state is being, but which could be targeted though. Is that what you're saying? Like that now that we're
correct,
that that's
correct.
it's
Yeah,
scary.
yeah. So, but to talk about the alien issue, if you wanted to try to bring people together and stop fighting, and you want to create an army of Earthlings, you get them to believe that the aliens are attacking and killing everyone. So you get a twofold agenda. You depopulate, um, by causing a war, and hopefully you bring everyone together as a one world government.
Wow, that makes sense, and that's really sinister too.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been fascinating. I was gonna say, is there anything else you wanted to cover before we finish up for today? And
Yep.
thank you so much. This was amazing.
No, no problem. Yeah, I'd like to talk about our Mind Nexus live event. It's a first of its kind where we have spiritualists. We're merging spiritualism, space, and science together with these top-notch speakers. Uh, we have Carrie Cassidy, John D'Souza, like I said, Ben Chastain, Dr. Rima LeBeau. I will be speaking and I will be doing this demonstration that I've talked to your listeners about. Um, it's going to be September 27th through the 29th in Tucson, Arizona at the Marriott Hotel there. The first 2 days will be a catered dinner, plus you'll get to engage with the speakers during the dinners. Um, there'll be vendors and everything. It's a huge event. There's a 3-day pass right now. If you go online and you type in, tell your listeners it, M Nexus, and they will get a reduction in the cost of the ticket. And also, if they can attend, we're doing live streaming worldwide. Our goal is that we would love to get 10,000 viewers worldwide. And for $99, you'll get a pass for the 3 days of the event. It really is a one of its kind. It's the first of its kind. And we would love to really get this agenda out there so we can start this awakening process for everyone. Because the number one thing that needs to happen is the first step in protecting yourself is being aware and understanding what the agenda is and what the motive is. And once we start there, we can continue to build on that. And we're not talking about being aggressive. We're really talking about being peaceful and loving, and we really need to ascend and become aware. Dr. Alex Bloom talks about transitioning into a 5D instead of being 3D, where we're just the sheeple. He talks about, he uses the analogy of a building where you go to 4D, you're awake, you're starting to awake, you can see what's happening to the people, and then you're pissed off. And then getting to 5D is where you get out of that anger and we start having solutions. And so it really is a nice event, and we would really love to hit that 10,000 live streaming viewers, and we would love to sell out and for one of a kind, so we can continue to do events like this throughout the United States and throughout Europe.
That's fast. Yeah, and like again, like they have an all-star lineup, guys. They have Kerry Cassidy, John D'Souza, the guy from Ben Chastain from Edge of Wonder, Tyler and Aaron are going to be there from Journey to Truth. It's. I mean, I was going to say, I know you're not into conspiracies, but you're about to go neck deep into conspiracy land because all those people go real deep. But I mean, but I'm sure you know that it's like there. It'll
Yes.
be a really cool event. It'll be awesome. Like you have a
Yeah.
really all-star lineup. I love all those people you have. Like they're all people I've watched over the years, and some of them I've communicated with, and some of them I've met in person. And Carrie was just I was just at the Full Disclosure Now conference in Florida, and Carrie was there. She was really nice. She had a great presentation and stuff like that. So I'm sure she'll have a really good presentation for you guys too.
Yeah.
It should be awesome. What's the website so people can look at look up at the
Yeah,
everything?
it's mindnexuslive.com, MINDNEXUS live, LIVE.com.
That's
If you go
awesome.
to that website, yeah, go to that website. You can see what we've put together, and we'd love to see you in Tucson. And if not, we'd love to see you on the streaming, and you'll be able to engage and interact and see these events. And the streaming, if you get a streaming pass, you have unlimited, you have a year access uh, to the recordings in the future.
Now, I wanted to ask you, are you doing anything are you doing anything with your personal hypnotherapy to like help targeted individuals? Like, are you doing anything like where you try to put people under hypnosis and try to like erase the targeting or not erase the targeting, but like nullify the targeting? Or what are you, or what do
So, so the ISA Act personality of me is the investigator, the one who started the data, wanted to get the data so that we can turn it from subjective, just what people are complaining about, to objective, something that we can measure. So that's what I did with ISAC. Now, the hypnotherapist part of me is the answer to your question is twofold. Yes, I can help people if they're highly suggestible through hypnotherapy. We can swing that gauge to where you're in a normal pattern, you're living a much more normal life and you're more productive. Now, I do have to work if you have been diagnosed with a mental disorder, or in the past, doesn't mean that you really do, because we know with this Havana Syndrome, people have been misdiagnosed. And so that's why we're doing this event, so that we can begin to educate the general population, including the medical community, because we'll have doctors, nurses, chiropractor. Dr. Jamal's a chiropractor. He'll be giving a speech there. He's phenomenal. But that is what we need to do. So the answer is yes, I can work with them. But if there's any type of medical diagnosis that where they're being medicated, we have to work closely with their physicians first before I can see you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And it's
Yeah.
mindlivenexus.com.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna put that in the description of the video. And I'll have everybody go check it out. And yeah, thank you. This was amazing.
No problem. Yeah. And if you have any more questions for me, just feel free to reach out for me. I'm
yeah, if you
easily
go,
accessible through Mike.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And if you guys want to do a follow-up show as this progresses, like if we find out stuff down the road, I'd love to have you back on, or if Mike wants to come on, and I can't remember the other lady's name that's involved with.
Desiree Foley and Mike are rock stars. I'm the president of the Cosmic Clarity Connections LLC, but without those two, we would never have this event happening the way it is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, they seem like really
yeah,
cool people, and
they are.
yeah, this was amazing. It's really stuff to really take in and consider, and I'm glad that you're trying to do something for targeted individuals, because it seems like nobody really is. Let me tell you. I mean, it seems
Well,
like like people. It seems like a lot of people that are targeted are lost and they don't know where to go, and
there aren't any resources. There are zero resources right now, and that's what really needs to happen. And now that Congress is saying, well, at least this phenomenon is happening to federal employees and it's happening to their family members, and they are not necessarily federal employees. So you're saying that this is happening to civilians. So they need to wake up and they need to create funding and resources so that we can get help for all these people that have been affected.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much, and
no
yeah, thank
problem.
you so much. I appreciate it. And until next time, and thank you everybody for tuning in tonight.